Hi, I'm Steve. This is How To in 5 and Reviews, and today I'm doing my used bike review on the Royal Enfield Himalayan. If you're a new viewer to the channel, welcome. If you're a return viewer, welcome back. So you're in the market for a good used trail / adventure, city, basically an all-round motorcycle that is what I think pretty reasonably priced on the second-hand market. There are a lot of these Himalayans kicking around now. This particular bike belongs to a friend of mine. He's had it for a couple of years and he has said to me in the past, why don't you do a review on the Himalayan? And one of the things that sticks in my mind that he said to me when I said, oh yeah, and I'm always a bit hesitant riding someone else's bike. He said, don't worry. He said, you won't break it. You can do what you want with it. They are as solid as a rock. Now, this is an owner that's had this bike for the last 2 years. So I'm going to give it a pretty comprehensive test and have a look at it from the maintenance side of things, right through to riding it on the bitumen, in the sand. I get it wet, I have it in the city. We'll have a good look at the motor and the bike in general to see if it actually cuts the mustard. So let's start with what powers the Himalayan. And it's a fair lump of a motor, as you can see. Well, it is physically, but it's 411 cc's and it produces about 24 and a half horsepower. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot. Well, actually, it's not a lot, but it works in this bike. With the suspension, the setup of this bike, it's ample. Okay, so we'll do a quick 0 to 100 on the dirt, or 0 to a little over 60 mile an hour. Actually, I'll have to move my head over a bit there so we can get the sun on the dial. And there's the 100. So let's try that 0 to 100 on the bitumen where I won't get any wheel spin. 3, 2, 1. Away. First. Second. Third. Just clicks into fourth, and there's your 100. Not bad at all. And it works right. This is a very simple motor. This is 10th month 18 build. So this is the sort of thing you'd be expecting to see on the second-hand market. You've still got a pull choke. It's a carby model, this one. So it's before the fuel injection. Overhead cam, a sizable motor. Actually, we'll have a look from the other side. And it's just simplicity at its best. I mean, look, you can see the clutch operation. It's still cable. It's not hydraulic. Starter motor here. Rear brake reservoir, nice and simple to get to. Although I would probably like some sort of little cover over there. Spark plug, nice and easy to get to. Oil filter down here. And something that's, actually, I'll move the camera down lower because this is really important. And we talk about ease of maintenance. An oil window, so you don't have to start the bike, warm it and start moving oil around, then wait a minute to do your check. It's a matter of have a look at the bike on a level surface on the center stand. This actually, the window is full here because I got the bike on a bit of an angle, but nice and simple. Absolutely no excuse for running low on oil when it's so simple to check. Oil filter, nice and easy to get to. And doing an oil change can often be a pain. You've got these sump guards that often have to be taken off. This one, you don't have to. There's the drain plug right there on the side of the bike. Just put the bike on the side stand, undo the plug, drain the oil, put it back in, refill it with oil. It's a 5-minute job. And yeah, look, it's just so simple. And of course, one of the reasons I talk about maintenance and looking after your own bike in my reviews is that it can cost you a lot of money when you've got simple motorcycles to look after, and this is about as simple as it gets maintenance wise. I mean, I've been around these things for 50 years now, and there are some bikes on the market now that I just cannot work on anymore. You've got to have specialized equipment that I don't have. So it's a big part of motorcycle ownership. Now, one of the criteria for any adventure bike, and don't be confused by the word adventure. A lot of people seem to think that an adventure bike has to be 1000cc, massive, great, multi-cylinder motorcycle. It doesn't. An adventure bike is any bike that you can strap a sleeping bag or a swag on the back, a tent, put on a bit of kit, head off, transverse a few different roads, dirt roads, maybe catch a track or two here and there, and basically get away from it all. This little bike fits that perfectly. I recently took it on only an overnighter just to see what it would be like in this scenario. I had the bike fairly well loaded up. As you can see in this picture here, I've got the top box loaded with gear. I've got the roll mat. I took the tent on this one because of the muzzy net. There's a heap of muzzies at the moment. It was about a 3-hour ride upriver, and look, it is a really good little bike. You have to be able to travel at 100 kilometres an hour or a little over 60 mile an hour on the dirt roads. It does that easily. Actually, I got a little bit bushed here and had to turn around and head back because the little GPS is so small that I couldn't read it. But it does that easily. It is a neutral riding position. There's no vibration, and it's got those little rubber inserts on the pegs, which I left on. Generally, I take those off, but when you're doing distance, it's nice to leave them on. And yeah, look, it is a great little adventure bike. Forks themselves, just the traditional old telescopic fork. There's no adjustments, preloads or any of that sort of thing. For this bike, they work well. In fact, it is so comfortable when you're on pretty average terrain. Ride to the bike speed and they absorb well. They're 41 mil, and what I love to see on bikes, and you just don't see it anymore, are the gaiters here that cover the actual forks and keep all of the rubbish out of the fork seals. Most bikes nowadays, as you know, the forks are upside down and they don't run gaiters anymore, and you do fork seals in all the time. And of course, if you're traveling with other bikes, you get rocks and whatnot banging onto the fork tube itself. So yeah, look, forks, more than adequate for this bike. 200 mil of travel, or about 8 inches of travel. So yeah, no, they work well. Now, one of the things I tend to do on a regular basis is get myself into all sorts of awkward spots where I'm up single lane tracks trying to do a U-turn. And that is really awkward. So an important thing for me with a trail bike is to be able to do a flick turn. Will the Himalayan do that? Handlebars fully over, bike laid over, all the weight on that left leg, and then give her a fistful and drop the clutch. Let's see how she goes. Now, one of the reasons, of course, that we do a flick turn is to save doing a 10-point turn, backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards. But one of the problems can be they use a fair bit of real estate. But look at that. The Himalayan actually does it in less than the length of the bike. One of the things that makes this bike so easy to live with is the seat height. If you're not the tallest person in the world, I mean, even if you are tall, it's okay. But if you're not the tallest person in the world, 31 or 31 and a bit inches, which is around that 800 mil mark, as an example, with about roughly a 32 inner, and I'm not wearing my motorbike boots, I'm just wearing a set of RMs, but I can sit here and just get both feet quite comfortably flat-footed on the ground. Riding the Himalayan through the hills is a lot of fun. I really enjoy riding this little bike through here. Remembering it's only 400 cc's and 24.5 horsepower, a little over 400 as we've spoken, but that's part of the fun of it. You find yourself having to use those gears up and down through the gears, 5-speed box, and it turns in and out pretty well. 21-inch front, 17-inch rear. I'm not sure if we've looked at that yet. No, I don't think we have. But they're trail-biased tyres that are on it, but they're fine. It's a heap of fun coming up and down through the hills. The brakes, remembering they are only small single disc, so you don't want to push too hard. Have we had a look at the brakes? No. What we'll do is have a little look at the braking on this bike. It's a 2-piston floating caliper on the front with a 300mm, or that's about a 12-inch rotor, 4.5mm thick. They're drilled, they're vented, and look, they're okay. I hear a few people complain about these brakes, but really just pull them a little bit harder. They're more than adequate for this bike. I have had no problems, I've had no fade, and I pushed it quite hard through the hills. 21-inch front wheel, 90x90 tyre, and it's a tubed tyre, spoked rim. And that's really handy if you are off the beaten track and you get yourself a flat tyre. You can pop in a tube. You always carry a spare tube, of course, when you head off-road or any sort of adventure riding. And look, I think it's fine on the front. About 8 inches of travel, by the way, on these front forks. I don't think I mentioned that before when we were talking about the forks. That's roughly 200mm, I guess. I'll just move that camera around a little bit. It also has this hugger that hugs the tyre. It's got the little beak, as you probably saw in the pictures earlier, but with the hugger, mud doesn't get all up the front of the bike, and that's really important with air-cooled motors, because of course you don't want to get the front of the motor clogged with mud. And these little huggers, you can see here the owner has put a couple of little spaces in to lift that front mud guard up, and the more aggressive you go with your tyre tread, of course you could bring it up higher. There's a little fork brace there that's standard on the bike, but look, yeah, it's pretty tidy up the front. So the front brake is not enormous, but it does the trick. Just pull a little bit harder, get that compression down onto the forks as you come into a bend, then release the pressure onto the power, ride it through, it's fine. Remembering I'm not going too crazy because I've got trail bias tyres on. Let's have a look at the back. On the right-hand side of the bike at the back here, 240mm disc, or actually I think it's 241. Single piston caliper. Once again, nothing dramatic to write home about, but look, it works well. I can manage to get this bike going along the road at 40, 50 mile an hour, dab that back brake just to bring the tail out, because you're not going to do that with the power. So you've got to get initial start of that back wheel sliding, if that's your style of riding, by jabbing the back brake, and that seems to work well. What do I got there? Bybury or something. Don't know what those, I don't know those calipers. But one thing interesting that I found, braided brake lines, front and rear. So they're not just the rubber tube, they're a braided brake line, which is nice. This one has an aftermarket exhaust put on it, a Yoshimura, I think this one is, that Wayne put on this one. Rear lights, as you can see, LED. You've got the reflector, so it's all 100% legal on the back. Indicators, I think they're just normal globes. But yeah, it's just, and I know I keep saying it, but it is just so simple, this bike. So I guess a lot of these bikes will spend a lot of time in the city. So we'll go down and we'll have a run through there. And this is where that low seat height really comes into its own. Bar width, 33 inches or 840mm, and that's to the widest part of the handlebars. The bars actually stick out slightly further than the mirrors, but filtering down through traffic, yeah, easy peasy, does it no worries, and that's that advantage of the low seat height. And one of the reasons I thought I would put this section in is you can see here that's a tram, in and around tram lines as I just veer to and fro across this. The big 21-inch front wheel, it doesn't affect that at all. And one of the reasons I always cover brakes is you never know who is going to pull out in front of you, so it's an important part of riding. Acceleration away from the lights, look left, look right, and away you go if you've filtered down through the traffic. It does that easily. It has plenty of power to navigate this bike in and around through the city, and that low seat height just makes it so manageable. As I said, you don't have to be 6'4" to ride this bike. Once again, another car straight out in front across both lanes. You've got to remain vigilant, don't you? But look, it is a really good city bike. It comes standard with that carrier and rack system, not the top box, but the carrier rack system on the back. It is a lot of fun to ride in and around town. And I mean, let's be honest, a lot of these bikes will only ever see the city and be used as a city commuter bike, and they are fine for that. They've got the adventure look to them, and then when you get tired of the hustle and bustle of the city, you head out and have fun. Okay, so the power's not going to rip your arms off. There's no disputing that, but even on dodgy, loose surfaces like this one, you can wind up the Himalayan and it gets along pretty well. And you know, at this price point, you can't ask for much more than that. Up in the cockpit itself, pretty straightforward. You've got indicators here, left and right, push to cancel. You've got a horn button under here, high beam, low beam. You've got your flash to pass. You've got your ignition cut here. Electric start button down there. Yes, it's electric start. In fact, there's no Kickstarter fitted to this bike. Speedometer, speedo in the middle here with miles and kilometres an hour. That's nice. In fact, I hadn't seen that with the mile per hour. In Aussie, which is where this is being filmed, we're in kilometres per hour. Tachometer here, pretty hard to read, I reckon. But the magic number on this bike is 5,000 RPM. To gear change, 5,000. To cruise at 5,000, which by the way is 100 kilometres an hour, or about 60, a little over 60 mile an hour. You've got a fuel gauge, but you've also got reserve, so absolutely no excuse for being caught out here without fuel. There's a compass here that I can't quite get my head around. You've got actually this is not standard, this is what the owner has fitted to this bike. A couple of USB outlets there, and a 12 volt outlet there, and a little Garmin GPS. And one of the advantages, of course, of buying used, and this is a used bike review, is that someone has already owned this bike. They have gone through, they've put on the front crash bars, which are not standard. They've fitted a little GPS. It's had the 12 volt outlets fitted, a set of extra racks. It's got these jet handguards on here. I know there's all different types of handguards, but they are worth their weight in gold if you come off. Just saves braking levers. And when you're tearing through the bush, which happens a lot here in this part of the world, they save you getting your hands and knuckles and everything belted by branches. Little windscreen on the front. Look, it is adequate for what it is supposed to do. It breaks the wind on your chest. You can see by the bugs and things on here. It saved me getting a lot. And sitting along at 100 kilometres an hour or 60 mile an hour, which is where this bike is comfortable, as we said, which is 5,000 on the tacho, it does break that wind. I guess the wind is hitting me at about eye height, I suppose, with the visor down, of course. So look, it is adequate, but if I was going to be doing extra long hauls, I reckon I'd like to see maybe another 4-6 inches even on that screen, 150 mil. But for what it's designed for, to break that wind on the chest, yeah, it does it pretty well. One of the things that makes this bike so, I guess, tractable to ride is that it's an under-square motor. So it's a 4-stroke motor, as we spoke about. It's under square, so it's got a 78 mil bore, so that's actual diameter of the piston, but it's an 86 mil stroke, so it's longer in the stroke than what it is diameter in the bore, and that gives it a nice torquey power delivery. There's no vicious, well, you're only talking 24.5 horsepower, aren't you? But there's no vicious power delivery. It's just smooth and linear right the way through the acceleration band, whether you're in sand, on the dirt. It's not going to surprise you and throw you off. Oops. And this is where that nice, smooth power delivery comes into its own. If you're doing a little bit of exploring on sand tracks like this, you're not constantly on and off the clutch. You can get the revs down really low and then gently pull away. It's not going to get like a power bandy type setup, and it makes it a pleasure. because you don't have to be going through here at 1,000,000 mph. You can just ride the bike and enjoy the trail ride. Comes standard with a little oil cooler. Of course, it's an air-cooled bike, so there's no radiator with coolant in it, but you do have this little oil cooler here, which is handy. It's a wet multi-plate clutch, so that of course generates quite a bit of heat and whatnot within the oil. So yeah, great thing. Little guard. I think the guard is standard on these. It's only a 5-speed gearbox, and I hear a few people say, oh, I wish it had a 6-speed, but to be honest, with the power that the bike has got, I think 5-speed is plenty. I think if you were to go any taller there and have a 6-speed, I really don't think it would pull it very well with only the 24.5 horsepower. But look, it's more than adequate. You can sit along all day and night at 100 kilometres an hour or a little over 60 mile an hour. And of course, to be a true adventure bike, it has to be able to get wet.
One hour later.
I'm drowned, the bike is drowned, but not even as much as a misfire. The Himalayan comes standard with a centre stand, and if you're wondering whether that's important or not, it is so much easier for when you're lubing the chain. But of course, if you get a flat tyre, as I did, it makes it so much easier to remove that rear wheel, get the tyre or get the wheel out, change the tube and whack it back in. A 120/90 17-inch rear, and you know we spoke about that centre stand, and that allows you to get up, lube your chain or take the rear wheel off. And when I got my puncture with this, as we saw in the picture, it was so simple. Wheel out, tube out, new tube in, half an hour the wheel was back in. I didn't even adjust the chain. It allows you just to slide that axle out, do your business, put it back together, so to speak. Put it back together, nice and easy. This one has had additional racks fitted on the back that house the owner of this bike. He has his Krauser bags that go on here. These racks in here are standard, and the little top rack, I've just got a top one on there to put the Gibby top box on. But fairly basic, well, not fairly basic, really basic, simple, straightforward, easy chain adjust. You can see this chain's hardly worn at all because she hasn't come back. Easy to lube the chain, and it's pretty well protected under here. You've got a little skirt there for the top of the shocker, so you're not getting stones and rocks and things belted onto the shaft. Rear tyre, it's one of those Pirellis again, and it's the is it M60, I think they call it, MT60. I see a lot of people put big chunky knobblies on the back of these. I think the rear tyre is adequate. When you start putting too much tread on low-powered bikes, it's very hard to get that wheel to spin and turn out. So unless you're in heavy mud or really heavy sand where you need that extra bite, I think the rear wheel is more than adequate. If you're a regular to my channel, you'd know that I love riding bikes in the sand. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I really enjoy it. Where a little more tread would come in handy is this next clip I'm going to show you here. I had it in the sand hills. This is quite a steep, about a 45-degree climb, and it climbs up there really well. Yeah, the camera angle doesn't do that justice, just how steep this is, but the low seat height allows you to paddle your way down. The owner of this bike has fitted these enormous crash bars, and initially I thought, oh God, they're way too big. But you know, when you look at the vulnerability of this gear stick here and it doesn't fold, I think that's a great idea. If you drop the bike over onto the side, you're going to, protect the actual gear lever. It's not, as I said, a bendy one, and the linkages. So in hindsight, that's actually a really good thing. Balance-wise, for picking your way through the slow stuff, yeah, it's fine. It does it really well. And although it's got a fuel gauge, and we'll have a look at the instrument panel there, it's still got a fuel tap with the reserve on it. And if ever you've been caught low on fuel, to have a couple of litres, actually I don't know what the capacity is, but to have a bit of reserve fuel is wonderful. On the back here, little keyhole, pop it in there, turn. That then allows you to release the seat and get access down under here. There's the top of the battery and your fuses. There's a little cubby hole here. What's he got in there? A USB plug. But what I can't find is a toolkit. So I'm not sure if it comes with an extra toolkit or not. Most bikes do. Well, they certainly used to. And while we're down this side, and I'll just move that camera across, as far as air filter, and we speak once again about that ease of maintenance, 1, 2, 3, 4 little socket head caps, whip off that cover, complete access to your air cleaner. It has a 15-litre fuel tank, which is just under that 4 gallons US. And I think over the period of riding this bike, and as I say, it's almost a month now that I've been riding it in all sorts of conditions, I averaged around 60 mile to the gallon. That's Aussie or UK. That would be around the 51, 52 mile to the gallon US. And that's pretty good. I had it on the freeway. Now, our freeway speeds in the part of the world that I live are 110 kilometres an hour. That's around that 70 mile an hour. And it does start to run out of breath up there. It tops out around the 130 kilometres an hour. But really, as I've mentioned before, that magic number is 100, 60 mile an hour. And on these sort of roads, I mean, it's ideal. It just loves it. And one of the things that I love doing is exploring, and that's all part of weekend trail riding, isn't it? And of course, here in Australia, we have millions of acres that we can explore and ride. We're very lucky there. And this bike, it takes me back to a time that I have to be honest and say I had almost forgotten. The power delivery is smooth. It just chugs along. It's not snatchy like so many bikes now. It's very reminiscent of my old XT500. But if people whinge about the brakes on this bike, they should have ridden my old XT. It is just so simple and easy to ride in these conditions. And I think for young riders or old alike, I mean, there's a lot of riders out there that have ridden for many, many years, more than I have, that are intimidated by the very tall, awkward to ride bikes. I think this bike could have reintroduced many, many riders back to motorcycling, which is just wonderful. It has the retro looks, the manageable price, the easy maintenance, all the things. If you're just looking for an easy bike to own, I don't think I can think of one easier than this Himalayan. A quick hunt around eBay and a few of the bike accessory mobs, and it shows that the pricing for spare parts, accessories, etc. for these Royal Enfields are really, really well priced. You've got about 8 inches of clearance underneath this bike, or just under 200 mil, which is plenty. I mean, this really is a basic, old school riding experience. The more you ride this bike, the more you want to ride this bike. You tend to feel at one with this bike after a very short time. And that's always confidence inspiring. It's good for pretty well anyone across the board. And if you have big, fast road bikes, etc., I think this would be the ideal addition to your garage of motorcycles. Or if you're just looking for an easy bike to own and you only ride every now and then, it fits into the lower license category, being lower on the horsepower and the CCs. And also it fits into the lower registration cost category here in my part of the world. And that's important, especially if you're a casual rider that doesn't ride that often. You save a bit of money there also. The clutch is nice and smooth on this bike. It's a 5-speed box, as we mentioned. The gears are slick. In the entire month of riding this bike in all sorts of conditions, I did not miss a gear. I didn't find a false neutral or anything like that. This bike doesn't compare to any other bike on the market, and no other bike compares to it. It really is in a category all of its own. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you're in the market for a used Himalayan or just been toying with the idea, this helps. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button for me and subscribe to have a look at future videos and past videos. It all helps the channel. But it's probably time for me to now go in, put my feet up, have a cup of tea, put this video together and give you my final thoughts on the Himalayan. Well, there you go. I have enjoyed every minute of the last month of riding this Royal Enfield Himalayan. Who's this bike suited for? Look, young and old alike, experienced and inexperienced. It would have to be one of the most versatile, user-friendly bikes on the market. And every time I ride this bike, I have just got the biggest smile on my face. Sadly, I have to give it back. Would I buy one? In a heartbeat.